Good evening. Thanks for joining us on India Business Hour. I'm Shireen Bhan. The headlines we're tracking for you tonight.
Both SBI and LIC have issued detailed statements. They have very clearly said that their exposure is very well within the permitted limits.
In her first reaction to the Adani crisis, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman says the exposure of SBI and LIC remain within permissible limits, asserts that India remains a well-regulated financial market and that regulators have kept the stock markets in prime condition. That's a Network 18 exclusive. Adani Group stocks see wild swings in trade. Some group stocks end in the green after getting battered for the last 6 sessions. Sources say LIC has not sold any shares yet and will get on a call with the Adani top management. SBI says loans to Adani form 0.9% of its total loan book, which is more than 27,000 crore rupees, remains confident of the Adani Group's ability to service its debt. RBI issues a rare statement saying it remains vigilant and that banks are in compliance of the large exposure framework. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman expects the fall in inflation to sustain for the long term, says the cooling off prices is not momentary and there shouldn't be much pressure on the central bank to maintain the pace of rate hikes. Also adds that the final decision rests with the Monetary Policy Committee, which meets next week. A volatile week on Dalal Street ends with the Sensex gaining over 2%. Adani Enterprises, the top loser, down over 42% this week. ITC reports a steady Q3. Profits rise 21%. Margins expand to more than 38% ahead of estimates, but revenue growth of over 2% was lower than expectations. Indigo's Q3 profits soar 11-fold as air travel takes off. Revenues grow more than 60% as higher demand offset the rise in fuel costs. Apple, Amazon, Alphabet report a slowdown in growth in Q4. A drop in advertising revenue and a slowdown by consumer spending leads to cautious growth outlook from the top tech firms. The Supreme Court gives the government 10 days to clear names for the transfer of judges, warns of unpalatable consequences in case the centre fails to clear names. The court observes the government may have a view on new appointments, but to not allow even transfer of judges was impermissible. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken will make a rare visit to China next week, hoping to stabilize the rocky relationship between both sides. Ahead of that visit, the U.S. claims to have spotted a suspected Chinese spy balloon over Montana. This could strain relationship between both nations even further. Well, the top story tonight, and this is an exclusive. For the first time, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has reacted to the Adani crisis. Speaking exclusively to Rahul Joshi, Sitharaman said the exposure of LIC and SBI to the Adani Group remains within permissible limits. In what has been her first post-budget interview to a private news network, the Finance Minister asserting that India remains a well-regulated market where regulators are stringent about governance. Take a look.
The opposition is taking aim at your government, saying that the banking and insurance companies have large exposure in Adani stocks. And the investors and the broader market is looking to you for some direction on this issue. Is our banking and insurance system resilient to take this shock?
I want to recall the words, coming from the horse's mouth has greater credibility. Both SBI and LIC have issued detailed statements. And I know the chairperson or the CMD has himself come out and explained how they are not overexposed or whatever they said.
Yes.
And also said, look, we are sitting over profits for the exposure that we have, which is well within the limit. That's what I understand they have said, and I've again read it through the media. They have very clearly said that their exposure is very well within the permitted limits, and that they are, even now with the valuation falling as well, they are still sitting over profit. So if that is the horse's mouth, as I refer to, word from the horse's mouth, but in general, both with the RBI, we do have the Financial Stability Board's meeting, which happens once in 6 months. We meet, even recently we have met. So I can only very clearly say both the RBI and We, because of the FSB's meeting, Financial Stability Board's meeting, know that the Indian banking system, if anything, at this stage, for me to use this word, I want to use it with a sense of responsibility, like having gone through the twin balance sheet problem, Indian banking sector today is at a comfortable level.
Some of the global investors as well, as a knee-jerk reaction, seem to have pulled out some money in the last couple of days. Some have put, fresh investments on hold. What would your message be to the global investors?
India remains, as before, an absolutely well-governed, stable government and also very well, regulated financial market. And as a result, I think the investor confidence which existed before shall continue even now. Our regulators are normally very, very stringent about certain governance practices, and therefore they should, one instance, however much talked about globally it may be, I would think is not going to be indicative of how well Indian financial markets are governed. So many lessons have been learned over the decades, and therefore I think our regulators have kept our market well in prime and prim condition.
And you can catch the full interview with Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman at 9 p.m. right here on CNBC-TV18. Well, speaking of the Adani Group, those stocks saw some wild swings in trade today. All 7 group stocks hitting the lower circuit in early trade, but then managing to bounce back in late trade, some even ending in the green. Ever since the Hindenburg report was released, the Adani Group's market cap has eroded by nearly 9 lakh crore rupees. At its peak, the conglomerate's market cap was at nearly 25 lakh crore rupees. Just before the Hindenburg report was released on the 24th of January, the market cap was under 20 lakh crore rupees. Currently, the market cap is just over 10 lakh crore rupees. Today, the S&P Dow Jones Indices has announced that it will remove Adani Enterprises from its sustainability indices, citing allegations made in the Hindenburg report. Global rating agencies Moody's says the Adani stock rout can hurt the group's ability to raise capital. However, Fitch does not see any immediate impact on its rating. And staying with that story, the Reserve Bank of India has issued a rare statement without naming the group. The RBI says it remains vigilant and banks are in compliance with the law when it comes to lending to the Adani Group. Ritu joins us now with the details. Ritu, you've got individual banks like State Bank of India, Bank of Baroda, IDFC Bank coming out with their statements on their exposure to the Adani Group and why they feel comfortable. But this is a rare statement coming in from the RBI, allaying any concerns about systemic risk.
That's right, Shireen, and as the finance minister just said, when it comes from the horse's mouth, it lends credibility, and this is as credible as it can get, coming in an unconventional statement from the Reserve Bank of India. Without naming Adani Group, it said that there have been concerns expressed in the media about the bank's exposure to a certain business conglomerate. But there, RBI clarifies that RBI has constantly maintained a vigil on the banking system and on individual banks through the CRILIC database that it has, on which banks report all of their exposures above 5 crores on a regular basis. Therefore, RBI believes that as per its assessment, the banking system remains resilient and stable, and that various parameters when it comes to capital adequacy, profitability, liquidity, provision coverage, etc., on all of those parameters, banks check the boxes. So there is no concern on that front. RBI also says that all of the banks it finds are in compliance with the large exposure framework rules, which stipulates that your exposure to a group entity cannot be higher than 25% of your Tier 1 capital. But that said, RBI does say it will remain vigilant and it will continue to monitor the stability of banks on one hand and financial stability. So there is no cause for concern. So individual statements coming in from RBI, LIC, SBI, several other banks, but markets continue to worry. But banks have been telling us that the exposure is towards cash generating assets and not against any shares, and therefore they're not so concerned.
Well, in fact, staying with that, Ritu, as you point out, State Bank of India has also said that loans to the Adani Group form 0.9% of its total loan book, which comes in at about 27,000 crore rupees. In fact, Ritu quizzed the SBI chairman Dinesh Khara about the bank's exposure. Khara says he remains confident of the Adani Group's ability to service its debt and does not see this as a challenge. Take a look.
In terms of exposure to Adani, we have lent to Adani for projects which are in fact having tangible assets and which are having adequate cash generation, and they have been in a position to meet their obligations. And as far as the quantum is concerned, that is actually just about 0.8, 0.9% of our total loan book. So from that point of view, we don't envisage any kind of a challenge in terms of their ability to service the loan obligations which they have taken. So, and also we have not extended any loan against shares, etc. There is no such portfolio which we have. So the impact of the stock market prices of the stocks will not really impact any of the margin calls, etc., and any of the loans which they have raised from us.
Well, that's the SBI chairman on the exposure to the Adani Group. No loan against shares. That's important there as far as SBI is concerned. LIC sources telling CNBC-TV18 that they will get in touch with the top management of the Adani Group to understand the future strategy. They also claim that they've not sold any shares in this current market sell-off. Yash is standing by with more. Yash.
Well, Shireen, if you remember, it was January 30th when we had first gotten in touch with the management at LIC, when they had told CNBC-TV18 that they are not trigger buyers or trigger sellers, they are long-term investors. And back then, they had said that they had not sold any shares of any of the Adani Group companies. Since then, it's been about 7 trading sessions. There has been some ferocious selling which we've seen in various Adani Group companies. And we got in touch with our sources at LIC again to understand what's happened in the last 7 days. The stand remains the same as per our sources. No shares, no holding of LIC has been sold as far as the management and our sources are concerned at LIC. What they say is that the strategy of being long-term investors still remains intact and no action has been taken on that front. Not just that, sources also tell us that LIC management plans to schedule a call with the Adani management. This could happen as soon as next week, where things would be discussed in terms of the future strategy on business, future strategy on debt. Also, the fall that we've seen in stock prices, because of course that impacts LIC's investment book as well. So all those issues are expected to come up for discussion between LIC and Adani when that call happens next week. As far as numbers are concerned, we've been reporting daily on how LIC's investment value has been going down. But largely, if you look at their investment portfolio, out of the total AUM, LIC has about 0.97% exposure to the Adani Group companies. As far as equity AUM is concerned, that exposure stands at about 8%.
Okay, Yash, many thanks for joining us. And the Adani crisis continues to disrupt proceedings in Parliament for the second day. Opposition parties continuing their protest, demanding a probe into the allegations against the conglomerate. Their demands were rejected by the Lok Sabha Speaker and the Rajya Sabha Chairman. And on to the market action of the day. A sharp recovery in financials helping the market end with gains. The Nifty and the Sensex gained over 1% each. The Nifty Bank up 2%. Adani stocks also saw a big recovery in intraday trade. Meanwhile, what a volatile week it's turned out to be, with the Nifty and the Sensex ending finally over 1.5% higher, regaining half of last week's losses. The banks were the star performers. The Nifty Bank rallying over 3%, its biggest weekly gain in a month. But the Nifty Bank has also been battered on account of the volatility in the Adani stocks. Back to the Finance Minister's interview. She believes the decline in inflation is sustainable and that the central bank may not have to continue with the pace of rate hikes. She also added that the final decision, of course, on interest rates rests with the MPC. Remember, the MPC will be meeting on the 8th to take a call on interest rates. The Finance Minister also spoke about the cut in the highest surcharge and defended the new pension scheme.
The way in which inflation has come down, both by RBI's action and by the government's action, and the government's action has been steady and at it for some time. So I expect, since the fall in the inflation doesn't seem to be just a momentary or a 1-month affair, it should sustain itself in the process of coming down. The surcharge which I brought down, and which therefore is going to give benefit to some of the upper middle class and high net worth individuals.
That's right.
It's also because the Indian tax system should be seen for not being so harsh. With your 30% surcharge, you were reaching a total tax of 42 point something, 75 or something.
42.7%, yeah.
Even a person who's that, talented enough skilled enough, and is paid very well for his contribution to the firm and has a good earning.
Yes.
Take away nearly 42, 42.7. Doesn't make our system look fair.
What do you make of this growing clamor, especially in some opposition ruled states like Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, to bring back the old pension scheme? You know, in fact, Deputy Chief Minister of Maharashtra, Devendra Fadnavis ji, has also spoken about this. He said he'll look into the matter. What is the government's view on this?
See, when I talk about government's view, I don't want to speak as though this government view or that government's view. Who, after all, implemented it for the first time? If without adequate looking into of what it means, are we paying the current generation of pensioners by loading it onto the future generation?
Well, that is the Finance Minister, and you can catch more of that interview at 9 p.m. right here on CNBC-TV18. Well, it's been a big day on earnings, a big check of the earnings of the day. State Bank of India posted a strong third-quarter performance ahead of street estimates on all fronts. Net profit grew 68%, boosted by a reduction in provisions and strong core income growth. The bank's net interest income coming in at over 38,000 crore rupees, driven by a strong loan book, while asset quality was at a 6-year high. FMCG giant ITC delivering in Q3 with both profit and margins ahead of estimates. The company's profits grew 21% on a yearly basis, coming in at over 5,000 crore rupees. This was led by continued growth in its cigarette business. Margins at 38.4% versus an estimate of 35%. The company's also declared an interim dividend of 6 rupees a share. Stellar Q3 for the Bank of Baroda. The company reported its highest ever quarterly profit, which came in at over 3,800 crore rupees. Loan growth saw a rise of 18% on a yearly basis, which is the bank's best in 13 quarters. Meanwhile, the ratio of its gross non-performing assets, the lowest in 30 quarters. Indigo's Q3 profit soaring 11-fold on a yearly basis to more than 1,400 crore rupees on the back of a boost in air travel. The airline's revenue also jumped 60% year-on-year. Its EBITDA margin improving marginally to nearly 21%. Apple, Amazon, Alphabet have posted weak quarterly earnings. A drop in advertising revenue and a slowdown of consumer spending has led to a cautious growth outlook for the top tech companies. Shilpa standing by with the fine print of the big tech numbers. Shilpa.
The weather's gloomy in the big tech world. A day after an earnings miss from Meta, the three big A's, Amazon, Apple and Alphabet too, reported disappointing earnings for the October to December quarter. Why? The COVID impact continued, inflation is forcing consumers to spend less, and companies are advertising less and are investing lesser in cloud. Take Apple, for instance. The iPhone maker reported its first revenue decline since 2019, and its profits also fell 13%. Now, Apple attributed this to a challenging macroeconomic environment, foreign exchange headwinds, and the supply of the iPhone 14 and 14 Pro Max being impacted by the China COVID situation. Then there's Amazon, which reported its first yearly loss since 2014. Now, this quarter, being the holiday season, is usually huge for the company. But online store sales fell, and the company gave a guidance that was lower than expected and said that it expects slower growth rates for the next few quarters. Why? Like I said, consumers are cutting down on discretionary spends. Its cloud arm, AWS, which is actually Amazon's profit driver, also saw a slowdown. And the company also incurred costs on employee severance. And finally, Google's parent, Alphabet. Not a great picture here as well. The net profit fell for the fourth consecutive quarter, and this was on the back of revenues of the Google search engine and advertising falling as advertisers pull back spending and the global macroeconomic climate. Now, dark clouds over the big tech will continue, with these companies warning that the slowdown will continue in the next coming months as well.
Shilpa, many thanks for joining us. That's the big tech report card for you. We'll take a break. Up next, the Supreme Court gives the government 10 days to clear names for the transfer of judges, warns of unpalatable consequences in case the centre fails to clear the names. That and more when we return.
Bertram, meet Hector, the car that pampers me.
Pampers you, sir? Only a car.
Hello, MG. Good morning.
Good morning. What a beautiful day.
This is my favorite. Traffic jam assist. Ta-da!
Sir, please.
Relax. Hector's got this. Told you, it pampers me.
The next-gen MG Hector. It's a human thing.
When it all began, I had only a few runs on the scoreboard and fewer spectators in the stands. And then what? I worked harder, and that's how from Saurav, I became. When you live up to expectations, then winning people's trust is possible. And trust results in Bandhan. Like Bandhan Bank, aapka bhala, sabki bhalai.
Malabar Gold and Diamonds continues its global expansion drive and opened its 300th showroom in Dallas, USA. On this occasion, Malabar Group Chairman extended his heartfelt gratitude towards all customers. Upholding the ideal of Make in India market to the world, the group aims to showcase Indian handcrafted jewelry to the world and become the #1 global jewelry retailer. The group will soon begin its operations in UK, Bangladesh, Australia, Canada, Egypt, Turkey and South Africa.
Invest once and enjoy guaranteed maturity with life cover with LIC's Dhan Varsha, a single premium plan for your family's security and prosperity.
Well, a quick check of the other headlines. Government officials say that part stake sale in AZL, other offers for sale will help the government meet its disinvestment target of 50,000 crore rupees this fiscal. But sources say that meeting next fiscal's disinvestment aim of 51,000 crores could pose a challenge. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken will meet China's President Xi Jinping during a visit to Beijing next week. This meeting will mark the US's first sit-down with the Chinese leader since 2018. Blinken will discuss a range of issues which include Russia's war on Ukraine and Chinese military activity around Taiwan. Remember, US-China relations have been tense over issues like trade, security, Taiwan, and the handling of the pandemic. Ahead of that visit, here's something that could strain the relationship even further. The US is tracking a suspected Chinese surveillance balloon that's been spotted flying over sensitive sites in recent days. Defense officials have said that they're confident the high-altitude surveillance balloon belonged to China. However, China has warned against speculation until facts are verified. The battle between the Supreme Court Collegium and the central government over judges' appointment has intensified. The top court warns the government of unpalatable decisions if it fails to clear names within 10 days. Ashmit joins us now to take us through the Supreme Court's observations. Ashmit, strong words from the judiciary again, but what can we now expect?
Well, tensions are clearly building between the centre on one hand, the Supreme Court Collegium on the other, and increasingly coming close to a breaking point. The issue, of course, is that of judicial appointments. We've seen roughly about 6 hearings where the apex court in open public hearings has been asking very pointed, sharp questions to the centre and issuing very public warnings to the law minister as well as to constitutional functionaries. The issue specifically in today's hearing that Justice Kaul dealt with was the subject of transfer of judges. Now, Justice Kaul observed that as far as appointing new judges is concerned, that is a space where the centre is likely to have an opinion, and that's fine. However, the Supreme Court observed that as far as transfer of existing judges is concerned, that, the Supreme Court said, is an administrative function, is clearly the prerogative of the Collegium and has absolutely no role for the centre to play. And therefore, the question that was asked of the centre is that why is there a delay in clearing these files, in clearing the transfer of judges? And that is where the Supreme Court, in fact, warned the Attorney General that it will not be shy of passing orders that will be unpalatable towards the centre, and even went to the extent of saying that its hand should not be forced into passing orders that will be uncomfortable for the centre. Strong words these. Simultaneously, we also had disclosures being made by the Law Ministry before the Parliament, where for the first time they confirmed that they have written to the Chief Justice of India recommending a selection-cum appointment panel that will have representatives from the government, in case of high courts, even representatives from the state governments. This is the first time that we're hearing this confirmation formally by the Law Ministry. So clearly, tensions brewing on both sides posturing before each other. The hearing in this case, we understand, will resume once again in 10 days' time.
Ashwat, many thanks for joining us. The Supreme Court has issued a notice to the Centre on petitions challenging the blocking of a BBC documentary on Prime Minister Modi and the 2002 Gujarat riots. The court has directed for records to be placed before it. The Apex Court, however, refused to pass any interim orders on the matter. And before we go, here's news that we've been waiting for a while. Vodafone Idea has just issued a statement saying that the government has in fact passed an order in which it has decided now to convert Vodafone Idea's AGR dues worth 16,133 crores into equity. Remember, this has been long pending. It's been almost a year while the government had cleared this decision. The conversion hadn't taken place. In fact, just a few weeks ago when I had asked the Telecom Minister about this, he had said that the promoters need to infuse money. But now we're given to understand that on the 3rd of February, there has been an order passed by the government on equity conversion. Vodafone says the company will take all necessary actions to undertake the aforesaid issuance. Before we go, let's very quickly also tell you what this actually means as far as Vodafone Idea is concerned. This amounts to about 27% of Vodafone Idea's dues. So what will be converted is 16,133 crores worth of AGR dues will be converted into equity. As we said, this has been long pending. The government has been holding back on this decision, and finally on the 3rd it has been taken. This decision has been taken. This is good news coming in for Vodafone Idea. With that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of India Business Hour. Thanks very much for watching. Stay tuned. The news continues here on CNBC-TV18.
Friends, I want to share some good